Well, we're going to talk about this a bit more now with Fox Fisher, who transitioned 7 years ago, is now the director of My Generation and an advisor to the charity action group All About Trans. And he's here with me now. Thank you very much for being with us. So these figures, I mean, the police are saying it's partly at least due to people being more confident about reporting hate crime. Do you think that is part of the explanation, or is it just a general increase in that kind of crime?
I think regardless of that, we definitely have an issue in the UK with transphobia that we really need to address. So I'm really glad that this report has come out. I think it's partially that people feel safer or more able to report because they've been encouraged to report hate crime of any sort. But I think also there's a responsibility of the press, and I think the mainstream media has a lot to answer for when it comes to reporting of trans issues.
Right, what could they do better that they're not doing now?
I think what they're doing at the moment, and often seem to do, is create some sort of debate, and I think that trans lives just aren't up for debate at all. And also they seem to be giving platform to people who aren't experts in the field and just seem to be there to cause misinformation or fear-mongering, things like that.
And do you think this is a particular problem in this country, in Britain, or is this around the world, is this around Europe?
Unfortunately, transphobia is rife throughout the world. Brazil, for example, is the country with the highest rate of murders for trans people. If we're not killing ourselves, then people are trying to kill us, which is really, really sad. I think that other issues, at the start of the transition, they're very vulnerable, and often trans people don't have what we call passing privilege, which means that they may never have the ability to be seen as the gender that they feel they are. So when there's when there's negative media, there's a knock-on effect, and it filters down to the public. People who maybe don't conform or don't have this passing privilege, or at the start of their transition, or for whatever reason, are gender non-conforming, they risk attacks.
And is this mainly online? When we talk about attacks, I mean, how much of this is online with the explosion of social media? How much of it is face-to-face, physical?
Sure. In the UK alone, we've had Naomi Hersey, for example, who was murdered last year, at the end of last year, Amy Griffith a few months ago as well. So these attacks are real and actual, and even just scrolling through my feed today on Twitter, for example, there were people saying, oh, thanks to a negative documentary that came out yesterday, or one that they felt was quite negative, they were sent hatred online, you know, just trying to antagonize them. So,
and what's the advice to people who are suffering this kind of
I would say,
transphobia? I mean, how have you dealt with it down the years?
It's a tricky one. I get a lot of my transphobia online, so every single day I get hateful comments. I'm in a position...
Is this on social media, on Twitter?
Yeah, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all sorts of... Every single platform I receive hateful comments, but also I'm there to support other people, so I'm happy to keep those channels open.
You're not tempted to come off those platforms?
It is very tempting, and I would advise people who are in a position where they don't feel as confident as I do to just step away from that, because it can have severe effects on people's mental health.
Do you develop a sort of thicker skin as the years of that continue?
I'd like to think I would. I mean, there's threads and threads about me on various places online, and I don't actually look at those. I'm told about them and I just leave them alone, because I think to go down that path is just not good for anyone's mental health. But other people deal with it by engaging directly. I tend to block and delete comments.
So, I mean, what is your advice to people who are suffering that kind of abuse, whether it's online or physically, face-to-face? What would you say to people?
Gosh, I mean, people having to deal with, you know, in defense all the time, and it's so sad, because I'd rather that we were actually dealing with the transphobia itself. But I suppose people just need to know the limitations, maybe, and I suppose you only learn that by, you know, by putting yourself out there and seeing what negative comments come your way. But
and just briefly, you know, in terms of tackling transphobia, what more do the authorities need to do?
To effectively tackle transphobia, I think we need to look at the media and what they're producing, and perhaps there needs to be better guidelines for people and repercussions, rather than printing something outrageous and then apologising it the next week in a small section of the newspaper for something that they said wrongly. I think that there needs to be more repercussions and more awareness. I think we need to, like the organisation I work for, All About Trans, we go into these organisations and we give trainings to people, and we can't expect people to understand everything about trans issues, but I feel that all people deserve the right to feel, to express themselves for who they are, regardless of their gender identity and gender expression.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for coming in, Fox
Fisher.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.